Welcome to Eastmans Podcast Edition. I'm Mike Eastman, your host. Today I got Brandon Maddox, the founder, CEO of Silencer Central. Today we're going to talk a little bit of unique stuff. You know, silencers are becoming a very popular, portion of your gear. And backcountry hunting, it's a game changer. You know, if you want a follow-up shot and you want the ability to take that follow-up shot without the animal really knowing you're there, it's a game changer. I've watched it firsthand with a gentleman named Glenn Eberly. He shot a sheep, was able to get two good bullets in him because the sheep didn't run off with the first one. I witnessed firsthand with a deer, same thing, same rifle actually, with him. So it was awesome. So Brandon, where did you come from? Where'd you grow up? Where was Brandon spawned from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So hopefully I don't go into too much detail.
No.
I guess you give me like a timeout if I do.
Oh, I will.
So both sides of my family are from Alabama. My dad did ROTC.
So are you Roll Tide?
No, I'm War Eagle. My dad went to Auburn. My mom went to Alabama, and you typically cheer for whoever your dad went to school with. So my dad did ROTC to Auburn, and then he went to pharmacy and pay back his time. We were at Fort Ruckers where I was born, so South Alabama. Yep.
Oh.
And then my dad got into academia at Mercer University in Atlanta and Baptist school there. He was the assistant dean of the pharmacy school, so we grew up in Atlanta.
Okay.
And then he was offered a job to start a new pharmacy school at another Baptist university in North Carolina. So my dad started the pharmacy school at Campbell University, and the first class graduated in 1990. So that's when I finished high school.
Wow.
And then from high school, I went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. People think of, Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So I did undergrad in pharmacy school there, and then I went to go work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
And I went to work with Glaxo. Fortunately enough for me, my faculty advisor in pharmacy school was also the faculty advisor to the president of Glaxo. He had gone to pharmacy school at Chapel Hill. And so it was a good connection to kind of get into the pharmaceutical industry.
So you're a pharmacist by trade.
Yeah, and I keep my license up in Florida and also in North Carolina and South Dakota where I live now.
That can't be easy because there's working hours with that, isn't it?
No, you just have to do so many continuing education. So
Okay.
I do have to take so many classes per year. They've made it a little easier. When I first had it, you had to take so many different classes, but now North Carolina is very nice to me. They say, hey, we see you don't practice here. We see you don't live here. We see you don't ship anything here. If you keep your license up in South Dakota where you live, we're going to let you just automatically renew without doing any of the continuing education, which is
that's nice.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's very nice.
I went into the pharmaceutical industry and sort of worked my way up through sales and marketing, and then came back to our home office, which was in North Carolina, and sort of moved up the ladder pretty quickly into an executive level marketing.
Okay.
And then I met my wife, who is also a pharmacist, and she's from South Dakota, so that's how I ended up in South Dakota.
We moved home.
Yes.
I bet kids were involved in that.
Yes, no, good question. I should step back because people think this is crazy, but I did my MBA at Duke, which people think, why would you go to Duke if you went to Chapel Hill?
Yeah.
But my employer was paying for it, and Duke was more expensive. So
There you go.
And Duke
took advantage.
Yeah, so Duke was the number one MBA program or whatever when I applied. So I thought, well, if they're paying for it, it's more expensive. I'll go there.
There you go.
But yeah, so no, my wife was pretty good about moving around with me wherever I went, and we ended up in Florida, and I was a regional manager there in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so after kid number one, as soon as it was born, I was like, hey, let's look at going somewhere else. Because before she was born, she had some problems, and my wife's like, wouldn't it be better if we're in South Dakota where my whole family is?
Right,
Because my
for
family is very
support.
spread out. Yeah, so it made sense. I did say to her, hey, if you can make what you're making here in Florida, I'll move to South Dakota. And I didn't think it was possible. I didn't know enough about South Dakota, but, she had a job in about 30 minutes. So
You thought you were stacking the deck.
Totally.
Come to find out she was.
100%. So then the job was on me to try to find a job. And it's been very different than the Southeast. I mean, South Dakota, I love it. It's very conservative. People are nice, pro-business, but it's just so, just from a terrain. I'm used to trees in the South. There's no trees there. The wind blows like crazy. I told my cousins, when your grill moves across your deck, that's something wrong.
You go to bed, it's in the corner. You can wake up and it's falling off.
Yeah, but you probably have that in Wyoming, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not normal. I mean, I just say, I hope I never need a toupee. It won't stay on.
Yeah, wind is a challenge. It's fun, but it's a challenge.
Oh, it's different.
Keeps some of the riffraff out.
I do. I agree with that. That's one I like to quote is keeps riffraff out. Cold in the wind.
So you graduated pharmacy school, moved to South Dakota. How did you transition from, because you were still in the pharmaceutical industry when you moved to South Dakota.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does a pharmacist become one of the leading sellers, suppliers, and manufacturers of suppressors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the honest truth was, I'm not sure I'd ever heard of a prairie dog till I moved to South Dakota. And I saw these things like, prairie rats running around.
You're like, that's a squirrel. Wait.
Yeah. And I'm like, then I heard people saying, no, and they want you to come shoot them. And they don't charge you. And you can wear shorts. And you can sit on a
nice
bench.
Weather.
Yeah, exactly. And
If
I'm
the wind's blowing, you just load up, go home.
Heck yeah. And you don't have to eat them. You don't have to take them apart. I mean, it was like, man, I'm in. Everyone wants you to shoot them. So I started shooting prairie dogs. I went to a gun show with my father-in-law, and I saw a suppressor on a machine gun. He wasn't really selling it. It was just sort of ornamental, if you will.
Right.
And I thought to myself, that actually would work fairly well, I think, when I shoot prairie dogs.
To keep them from having dumped down in the holes.
Oh, yeah, because, anyone you call and say, hey, I want a prairie dog hunt on your land, they'll say, we haven't had anyone here in years. Come shoot them. They're not scared. They won't run. That's always a lie. You show up and there's like 5 other guys there, or there's like new brass laying there. So they've all been shot. That's the hard, unless you can find a place no one's ever been, which is impossible.
Yeah.
So it seems like every time I would shoot, they would go under.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, if I could get a suppressor. So I went into the local gun store and asked them, and they tried to talk me out of it. They're like, dude, you don't want it. It takes too much time. It's a long process. You don't want to do it.
Right.
I'm like, no, I think I do. And so the first one I got, they were right. It was a horrible process. They made me do everything, so I was in the driver's seat. There was only one guy in the whole store that did it, which is common. And it just, every time I showed up or called, he just wasn't there. It was the owner's son, so he was never there. And he's like, kept saying, well, I told you you didn't want to do it. So the first one I loved. I mean, I went out there and I ran out of ammunition. You're
going, oh my gosh, I found the cat's meow.
Oh, wow. And it was like, I was on the perfect place too. It was like this open prairie and there was a shelter belt. So I was like hiding in the woods, shooting them. And at the end of the day,
you were sniping prairie dogs.
Oh, it looked like a civil war. There was just like blood everywhere. I bet I killed 200 or 300 in a day. It was just,
my gosh.
It was insane. And it was on a reservation out there. You have to pay a little bit more, but no, then I was hooked. I'm like, I'm totally in. But I had gotten the wrong silencer. The first one I got was really heavy, and it was just me probably being cheap. Because the honest truth is that I couldn't find anyone who had used one before to say, hey, does this work?
Yeah.
So it was 100% risk. Yeah, it was 100% risk.
And there's nobody writing about them because it was a big, you're going to tell the whole story, but it was a big taboo story for a long time.
Oh, yeah, and I know like people think this is hard to believe, but like when I started in 2005, 100% everything on the internet about Class 3 was wrong. It was all kind of like hearsay, or here's what I think, or they can search your house, or the police will come get it, and you're on a list, and all these like weird stories about how it works, and no one really knew, to be honest. But the first one was too heavy. Even though I was shooting from a bench, that chrome moly steel, and I spent like $300 on that thing, so it was me probably being cheap and the risk. So the second one I bought was like really short, a little bit smaller diameter. It was just too loud.
Right.
So now I'm on the third one, and I'm like, okay. The license to get this to sell suppressors is kind of expensive, but I thought, you know what, maybe I should get my own license to do this. And then once I got it, then I started selling a few just to pay my own license.
Just to maintain it.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully this isn't taboo because I'm coming in this new. The company's called Silencer Central.
Yep.
But you're actually selling suppressors.
Yep.
Can you tell me the difference between a silencer and a suppressor, and why is there a difference, or is it just a naming?
Good question. So here's the nomenclature I have found. Most people, when they search the internet, they search the word silencer.
Yeah.
So that's easy. Google will tell you who searched what.
Yeah.
So for me, from a marketing standpoint, if the guy who's the new buyer and doesn't know that they search silencer, so that's why we put Silencer Central in our name. So we rank up really high on the search engines because of that. What I find is the first-time buyer calls it a silencer, someone who owns one or they're coming to buy a second one, they call it a suppressor.
Okay.
But typically what I say is the guy who invented it called it a silencer. The feds that regulate me, you have to call it a silencer. Like if you fill out the paperwork and it's a suppressor, they're going to reject it. So to them it's a silencer, and most of the customers call it a silencer the first time. But to be like truly accurate, it's a suppressor, but they are the same thing.
Okay. It's because it's suppressing not only the noise.
Right.
Through pressure, right?
Yep.
Through baffling pressure.
And that's the main thing is people say, well, it still makes noise. And so like when the American Suppressor Association, our industry trade group, when they first started, they were silencer. And then they kind of switched it just because suppressor sounds better. It sounds less evil, less Hollywood.
Well, yeah, right.
A little bit more, so it's like kind of an educational thing. But some people like want to fight about it online. No, it's not a silencer, it's a suppressor. But, I always say, well, if the inventor calls it that, the ATF calls that, and all my new customers call it that, I got to call it that.
Right.
But I get it, that it's truly a suppressor. But the legal term truly is silencer.
Huh, Well, that's good to know. I never wanted to ask that to anybody that, because it seems like it just goes back and forth. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna ask Brandon Maddox. Hopefully, it's not taboo. We'll find
totally.
out.
Yeah. No. People always. It seems like when people ask me that, and I, say it, no one ever really argues too much because you're basically saying both are right.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
how can you argue with that?
So you started buying these, selling a few of them.
Yep.
So were you just a dealer, or were you building them?
Yeah, good question. So this is going to sound crazy. It doesn't even sound like this is believable. I was in Pierre, South Dakota, a very small gun show. I started working gun shows. So I go into Pierre, South Dakota, and everyone in the grasslands area shoots varmints. It's either coyotes or prairie dogs. And I could just honestly, remember I had worked in marketing a long time. Yeah. And when I was in marketing and pharmaceuticals, our margins were great. So we spent a lot of money behind black glass. And you would get someone to talk to the physician, and you would talk about concepts, and then you would look at the physician's eyes, and you can kind of get a read whether they liked it or they thought that was a good claim, or if that's the reason why they would use the medication. So that's the way my brain thinks. So to work a gun show, and I could tell everyone was looking at me, and they said, I love the concept of a suppressor. I love the idea of making my rifle quieter. But what you're trying to sell me looks tactical-ish. It looks like, maybe
Rambo.
ex-military or weekend warrior, right, or Rambo knife-ish, or right, they would look at it and like, oh, I just love the concept, and then they look at it and like, yeah. So the other thing I found is when I bought a sound meter and started testing them. A lot of the suppressors on the market at that time, their whole goal was just to be hearing safe. And that's all they wanted. Whereas what I find with a hunter is they want it as quiet as possible because they want to be able to get a follow-up shot. Yep. They want to be able to not pollute an area if they're hunting with someone else who wants to shoot again.
And get the recoil benefits.
Yes. So what I could just tell at that show. So literally that Saturday night, I called a guy in Georgia who made a line of suppressors, and I said, hey, looks like you're focusing on hunting. Looks like yours are quiet. And also yours are light. At that time, no one had heard of using all titanium. Most people use steel. That's why years ago, when you bought a 30 cal, you would never have thought of using it on a 223 because they were always steel. It's too heavy. You would have never done that.
Right.
So I talked to this guy, Liberty Suppressors. He and I hit it off just because he's kind of right there in Georgia, at the corner of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and that's kind of where my grandparents were from. So I would go see my grandparents. He was about an hour away. I would go visit with him, and what he did is he started making his suppressors exactly like he was making them, but he would just put my name on them.
Oh, so you're OEM him.
Yep, exactly. And it worked out really well because when I was ordering directly from him, I knew which serial numbers I was getting. And back then, you had to have a serial number to do the paperwork. You can't submit the paperwork to the feds unless you have the serial number. So it worked out really, really, really well. And they displayed well at shows because that was my whole gig with shows. And when you hand someone a titanium silencer, 100% of the time they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how light it is. And
that happened to me. First time I ever picked it up, I was like, holy cow. It looks like it's a bar of, of rod steel.
Totally. But the hard part is if a guy, so, it's funny. If I go to a show like, say, Dallas Safari Club where everyone there already owns a silencer and I hand them a full titanium one, they're like, wow, that's half the weight of mine. Let's do it. Yeah. Like they want another one. They're like, I want mine to be super light. It's because they're a hunter and they want it as light as possible.
Yes.
So that show is when I realized that I got to have something different because I'm trying to sell a tactical item to someone who is a hunter first. And that's when I started down that path. And I really liked Liberty Suppressors, great guys, but the reality was I started selling more in my mind than they were. And I was wanting to give them feedback because a lot of people in South Dakota and then my second location, North Dakota, they're shooting bigger rounds. They want to shoot RUMs, they want to shoot Win Mags. And he was wanting to make them longer, and it became hard for me to sort of have inventory where some of them are not Magnum rated, some are, price differentiation, length differentiation. I just said, hey, I want one that does like everything, and I don't want it to have to be as long as like a missile launcher. And I get it, for him, he has his own product, he didn't want to make it. So I was working the Rapid City Gun Show, and some guys came up to me. They used to work at Dakota Arms back before Remington bought them, before it went bankrupt.
My dad has one of those rifles.
Oh, yeah, they're super nice. Yeah. So this is in Sturgis. Those guys are based in Sturgis. They came to me and they said, hey, that's all we make are firearms. We have a lot of interest in suppressors. Would you be interested in us making them for you? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. I said, I have some plans made. I have a meter. I've tested them. I know which ones are the quietest models on the market. And I basically gave them all the models that were the quietest. And I said, figure it out. I want it all titanium. My customers want to take them apart and clean them, which most of them you can't, and they want it super light. So quiet, light, comes apart to clean. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
And they did. So they were pretty much our initial manufacturer. They did all the R&D. They did the design. They did the testing. Yeah. So I felt very comfortable because that's all they do is firearms. They make a lot of stuff for GA Precision, Badger Ordnance. They do a lot of different firearms things. That's all they do. So they're very cognizant of pressures and what can handle what. And, they'll run a rum through it, 1,500 rounds to make sure it can handle pressure. So I felt super confident. So that's when I had them start making them, and they put their name as the manufacturer, and then they put the model number I had.
Okay.
So we did that for, 4 or 5 years. And then the honest truth is they couldn't keep up with us. And I sensed they were a little risk averse as far as wanting to expand, and I get it. I mean, they're relying on me, and we didn't really have a contract. I could have pulled the business the next day, but because they weren't really willing to take the risk and expand, then I had to start finding other manufacturers. So what we did is we started putting our own name on it. So the ATF will let you create a variance where someone else will make a suppressor for you and put your name on it. So you just basically submit all the paperwork showing we both have the same licenses. I'm going to be the end guy selling it. And in all honest truth, most firearms are made that way in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
So it worked out well where we would farm it out, where typically maybe you'd have 1 or 2 that make the baffles, 1 or 2 make the tubes, and 1 or 2 make the end caps, and then have 1 that assembles them. So we've done that, and we needed to do that just to be able to scale up. So at one point we had as many as like 18 manufacturers making,
Oh my gosh.
Because when you're making 100,000 suppressors a year, you really need to have a good pipeline.
What is how do you handle quality control when you're doing 18 different manufacturers?
Well, so what we do is we make the last one that assembles it, they own the warranty, and they have to do all the testing, and then we test them when they come in. So we have a way that we screw them on, and we have a laser that goes through and make sure the alignment is perfect. We have ways to check the thickness of the tube all the way through. We check the baffles, so it's worked out really, really well. I mean, we've spent a lot on engineers sitting there testing everything to make sure it meets the specs and everything's good, but it also helps to find really good manufacturers, because titanium is not easy to machine. That's why most manufacturers won't use titanium. Like some manufacturers will use, like, say, titanium tube, but then they'll use stainless steel baffles because it's cheaper, easier to machine, easier to get the stainless steel. But all titanium is very unique. So it's hard to, typically people who do all titanium are used to like military and also aerospace, and usually their quality is just super buttoned down. Now, I'm not going to mislead you. I have had several manufacturers we worked with that said that they could do it and they couldn't, and we had to sort of sever ties with them. But it's been interesting just to try to scale it.
So you're not building them all, you're not assembling them in South Dakota?
No. So Sturgis is based in South Dakota. And they probably do a third of ours there.
Okay.
The manufacturer that does that, but they come to us assembled. They come in, basically these huge crates. Forklifts bring them in with FedEx ground. So we'll get hundreds in at a time, 300 or 400. And then we do all the quality checks on them, and then we put them in the individual boxes, and we put all the other stuff that goes in the box with them there when they arrive.
That's awesome. So you were telling me a story about how, hopefully I'm not quoting you incorrectly, but you're unique in the sense that you can ship directly to my house.
Yeah, totally. So people think, like, how is that possible? At one point, the ATF told me they were getting 300-400 calls a week saying, how does this guy do that?
Yeah.
It really like throws other dealers for a loop because they've never heard of this.
Are you the only one that's doing it now?
Anyone can do it. I don't know of anyone else that's really doing it. Because the God's honest truth is, if you read the statutes of what I have to do to make that happen,
it's crazy.
Oh, it's like 5 pages long. Most people read that and go, I could never do that. I don't know how the guy figured it out. So here's the way it worked. So I'm not from South Dakota, but there's a little river that goes through South Dakota, and people live on the western side. They don't come to the east side. That's just the way it works. So we would typically only have one show a year over in Rapid City. And when we would go to that show, we'd sell a lot. It was always in April. It's during calving, so it hurt some of the ranchers, but it was we would sell a ton out there.
Right.
And back before Obama changed the laws, they wanted us to do a background check on whoever picked it up. Well, you can't do a background check unless they would come to your actual location, or a gun show is considered an extension of your location, so you can do transfers there. But if we were only going there once a year, if a guy got approved, and it was during, I don't say the winter, and we only go there in April, it just created this disconnect. So I hired a lawyer and just said, hey, I want to find a way to mail a suppressor from Sioux Falls, South Dakota to the other side of the state. And he's like, dude, you're an idiot. That'll never happen. Why would the ATF allow that? And then he called back about 2 weeks later, and he gave me this long legal opinion. Cost me a fair amount of money, but there is a statute that allows you to mail a firearm to a person without meeting them face to face. And the big asterisk is if no background check is required. So no background check is required on an NFA item, which is a silencer, because the ATF already had the FBI do the background check for us.
Oh, because it's already been done previous to sale.
So I still have to do a 4473. So that's the same, kind of creates the paper trail, make sure if that person uses it criminally, they could be prosecuted. So that's still the equation, but we just don't have to do it face to face. So that's what, and again, so when I first started, I realized when I went to 2 locations, to be honest with you, I didn't really know what I was doing. I started feeling uncomfortable, like what can I do, what can I not do? There was just so many moving parts. So I called ATF, and ATF for the Dakotas is based in St. Paul. And when I asked them, hey, how do I do all this? They're not really set up for like kind of customer calls.
Right.
And they were honest at that point, suppressors were illegal in Minnesota. So they just didn't have a whole lot of,
knowledge or.
Yeah. And I mean, I know they wanted to help, but they said, hey, call the National Farms branch, which is in West Virginia. That's all they do. But again, they process paperwork there. They don't have someone answering the phone, telling the dealer what to do. And, the common answer is hire a lawyer if you want to know what the laws say.
Yeah.
So what I did is I called National Shooting
Or their first answer is always no.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. And then, or they don't want to give you an answer. That's the bigger one. They don't want to tell you. And then it's up to you to mess up. So what I did is I called National Shooting Sports Foundation. I hired one of their experts who had just left the ATF. He had been very high up, like number 2. And he came to my house because that's where I did this business for a long time, was just out of my house. He's like, I cannot believe how many suppressors you've sold, because that's all we did.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm like flabbergasted. He'd been in the field in Illinois, and the suppressors are illegal in Illinois. So he's like, I don't know much about this either, but I've been in charge, so recently I'm going to call people and ask them how you do this.
Okay.
So he was at my house for 2 days, and, he did several things really, really well. One is he scared the absolute shit out of me.
Really?
He's like, if you don't do this right, they're going to put you in an orange jumpsuit and you're going to jail. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm a licensed pharmacist. My family's relying on my income, and I'm doing this thing on the side. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
He really, really scared me. And then he also helped me understand that the only person that's got to know the laws is you. Because if you aren't following them, the excuse that I didn't know doesn't work.
It doesn't count.
No, they don't care.
No.
And the other thing that he did.
I hope you're enjoying the content today. Today's episode is brought to you by Savage Arms. Now, Savage has been making firearms for a really long time, over 100 years. Now, they are what we call out-of-the-box accurate. They have some of the coolest features for an out-of-the-box rifle. The AccuTrigger, which single-handedly changed the way that my accuracy is, changed the way I shoot. I am way more accurate with that AccuTrigger because it is a 2-stage trigger that has a safety on it. And when you touch the second trigger, it goes off. It's the perfect surprise. They also have the AccuStock, which takes the barrel whip out. Unbelievable accuracy with the zero headspace, which is unique to them. Now, I'm going to tell you one of the coolest things they've developed, which is called the AccuFit. Those stocks you can take off with the same rifle. I can take the comb off, the pull, adjust it for my 12-year-old daughter, and she can shoot the same rifle I did, and I don't have to redial it in. It's perfect for her. It fits her. The AccuStock, AccuTrigger, and the AccuFit are some of Savage's best known things. Now, check them out at savagearms.com. They are coming up with new innovations every single day. They have new pistols now. It's unbelievable. Check them out.
A great job convinced me of that I'm not sure I would have been sold on if he hadn't done such a good job is call the ATF or write them a letter and they will work with you. Tell them what you want to do and ask them how do we work together to make that happen. A, I didn't know that was a possibility, but B, he's right. I was doing some things they hadn't approved. So when I sent them a letter and said, hey, I want to do this, how do we do it? They actually worked with me and we figured out a way. So going back to me mailing.
That's actually really impressive because rarely do you ever hear somebody in the that's working with the government say that type of a statement.
Totally.
When I worked with the IRS, that was never the case.
Yeah.
How do we get this fixed? No, it's just more penalties.
No, and it's an interesting situation. I mean, I always give him credit for helping me create that dialogue with ATF, and I just sent him a letter. Hey, I want to use this form that's no longer in print. Either can you start printing again, or you can tell me what form you want me to use since it's no longer in print.
Right.
And they basically worked with me, and we created what they called a variance. And eventually it became a ruling where anyone can use it. But at the time, it was a variance just for me. So right now, we probably have 4 or 5 variances that allow us to do a process probably differently than what anyone else is doing just because we asked.
Right.
And a lot of it revolves around being able to do things digitally. Just, the Gun Control Act was written in 68, and then the NFA was 1934, so a lot of that doesn't mention anything about digital. So just to try to sit down with them and figure it out.
We're in a new era. What are we going to do?
Yeah, totally. No, and it's, I've had some tough times. I've had variances. They pulled back later. I've had some disagreements with them. I mean, we always work it out. Anytime we've had a problem, we're all adults, so we just sit down and figure it out. I mean, I've flown to them. They've come to me. So I would feel like I have a very, very open relationship with the ATF. I feel like that it's better for me as a business owner, for my customers and my employees to know what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know for sure, but I'm not sure there's many other people that do that.
Yeah.
I just say, hey, can I do this? If they say no, we quit doing it.
I think it's a rarity, not just with you and in the government agency. I think it's a rarity, period.
No, I could tell they think it's rare. Like, really, you want to ask us that? And I'm like, well, I don't want to be in an orange jumpsuit. I don't want my employees in an orange jumpsuit, and I don't want any of my customers in an orange jumpsuit. So let's just figure this out.
Yeah.
And I do honestly feel more comfortable because it's hard to scale a business if you don't know if what you're doing is lawful.
Lawful, yeah.
But I totally think that guy did a great job convincing me. And so at that point is when I'm on the front row. Anytime there's a compliance meeting, convention, and ATF's there, because a lot of the laws in my mind are open to their interpretation. Do I like it? Of course I don't like it. But at the end of the day, they have a monopoly on enforcing the rules. So I might as well understand what the issues are for them. And my experience is if I hear them talking about an issue, typically the next time a Democrat's elected, that becomes an executive order and it goes away. Like it's no longer available. So that's why I like to have a pulse on what's going on. I mean, I knew that. Oh yeah, I knew the solvent traps were going to be a problem. I could tell this, braces, ghost gun, whatever they call the ghost gun, all these different topics. They'll talk about them in group settings, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be an issue. Good thing my business hasn't been a part of that, but just having a pulse on what's going on there. I did have the director of the ATF come to our actual physical location in South Dakota. I think it was 2017. I've invited the new director. I saw him at SHOT Show about 2 weeks ago. Invited him to come, tour our facility, see what we do. Very transparent, open communication with them.
Right.
And he seemed like he's super interested in coming. So I feel like, hey, I want to help him understand about the backlog so that we can speed it up.
Yeah.
Help him understand the pressure it puts on us as, right now the ATF only updates their website every quarter as to how long it takes them to approve these forms. So if the numbers go up, people are looking at the ATF website, they're calling
3
me
months.
like, yeah, people will call me and say, hey, it says on the website for ATF it's 6 months. I've been waiting 7. What's the problem? Well, they haven't updated their website. So there's some good things I look forward to kind of talking him through. And I think that he's definitely not a gun guy, so just getting him in our facility, hopefully touring him around, showing him what we got going on, helping him understand the NFA process, I think it can only help our customers. That's
huge. And that's huge because the customers, you're really about. And I was introduced to your product at Safari Club when we were sitting at a show.
Oh, sure.
Walked up, and actually my dad had vetted it.
Oh.
And he walked up and he's like, you got to check these out. These are light and they're perfect for backcountry. This is what we're doing. This is what you need. And of course I bought one and I'm in that waiting era period, which is fine. That's what it is.
Sure.
There's nothing I can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. It's
Right.
ATF. But I'm really excited to start using them in the backcountry. Like I said, I've been around it a couple times, and it's a game changer. I really am excited to have my kids use it.
Yeah.
Because you have a recoil, plus they're not scared of the noise.
Perfect.
Plus they're willing to shoot more, which
Yes.
just makes them better.
Totally.
And that's very cool. So what's the future? Oh, actually, I have another question. You mentioned this recently. You talk about hunters versus, I don't want to say the black gun industry, but the that side. Do you find your customers are split down the center, or do you find what's the mix?
Yeah, so we poll our customers, so we know exactly where they're at. And so I told you our roots are in the Dakotas, where I would say 100% of our customers are hunters, meaning that they hunt first. They might target shoot, they might do other things, but they see themselves as a hunter first.
Yeah.
And I think with us having focused on that's just our roots. That's where we're at, and that's really where our products are at as well. Most of them were made for that audience. Now, of course, we have handgun suppressor. That's probably not too much the hunter.
Yeah.
We sell some of those in states where you can't shoot. You have to use a straight wall cartridge for deer and things like that. But I would say that, if we surveyed our customers today, you would find probably 85 to 90% are hunters first.
Wow. So these aren't big military contracts. These are Joe Blows that you're shipping to their doorstep.
Yeah, 100%. Totally. Oh, yeah, 100%.
So suppressors to me is new. I mean, this is 3 years old for me.
Yeah.
what's the average? I've heard this statistic that is not accurate, I'm sure, but what's the average number of suppressors? Once a guy buys one,
Yeah.
how many does he end up with?
Yeah, no, good question. So I'll tell you a statistic. So there's about 3.5 million suppressors since the NFA started tracking them and requiring them to be registered. So that's how many are made. So it's like between 3.5, 4 million. There's 1 million people own all those. So the average person owns about 3 to 4.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so that's the hard part. Like everyone that uses them loves them. They love them so much they go out and buy more. The question for me is always, how do I tell more people about them?
Yeah.
And my insight, and again, so I told you that when I was in pharmaceutical marketing, sitting behind the black glass, looking at the customer. So we're almost 18 years old. So when I worked shows I'm working this show here for 18 years, the biggest obstacle for the customer is the process.
Yeah.
So once we tell them that we're able to fix the process, they're interested. So the goal is, my sort of wake up every day, how do I tell everybody that we make the process easy? Because in my mind, that's the reason why not everyone has one, is because they're worried about the process. There's too many unknowns in their mind. That's how I knew instantly it was going to be a business opportunity for me when I set up a little small booth in the Sioux Falls, South Dakota gun show, and they wouldn't give me much space because most people in that audience
Didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, they're collectors, so they didn't see silencers, even guns. They were trying to get me out of there. But I had an uncle, my wife's uncle, he's a pharmacist too. He had a little small part of his table he gave me, and I had my 3 used silencers, and I had the biggest crowd in that building, like 15, 20, 30 people sitting there listening. Yeah, and then finally they're like, "Sir, can you move over here to one of these empty tables that someone didn't show up to this morning because you're blocking traffic?" I was like, man, I can figure this out. I think I can make this work, just because I had all the right answers, because I had been studying this stuff. Like I told you, I realized very quickly that guy who came from the National Shooting Sports Foundation said, you've got to become an expert in this if you truly want to do it. Like either do it or don't do it. Like get in it and understand it 100% or get out. And that was what I needed to hear. So now everything I could read. I've read every FFL newsletter the ATF's ever sent out. I've read all their laws. I've read the interpretations. I read all the letters they send to other manufacturers and dealers that are available publicly. It just became sort of like my thing, just a resource.
So it is easy. Let's talk about the process. I was actually shocked how easy that process is. Now, there's hoops you have to jump through.
Oh, totally.
And it honestly, in my point, for me, it was a little daunting, because you guys start talking about trusts.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't know if I want to, I don't know what that means. I'm an attorney. That sounds like I need an attorney standing next to me.
Yeah.
But you guys walk through the process really quick. So what is the process? What makes it easy now?
Yeah, good question. So sort of a backgrounder about the process. So typically the best analogy I can tell someone that walks up to the booth is it's just like buying a truck. Almost every customer has a truck.
It's way easier than your house. I guarantee you.
Yeah, totally. So think of it as like a title transfer. So if you go buy a vehicle, the dealer's got to transfer the ownership of that vehicle from that dealer to the actual end user. And typically you have to go through the courthouse to pay a fee to make that happen.
Right.
It's pretty much the same thing to get a suppressor. So in simplest terms, we're asking the ATF to take that suppressor and retitle the ownership from us, the dealer, to you. They run a background check on you to make sure that you can lawfully own one. They charge a $200 tax stamp, just like you would pay at the courthouse if you bought a vehicle.
Yep.
And then when it's approved, that's when we can mail it to your front door. But as far as the process, I think what we've streamlined is every day we wake up and say, how can we put the burden on us? Like, how can we make sure that it's on us and not the customer? Because when I first bought mine, it was like, here's the forms, go figure it out. And it wasn't rude. It was just sort of like, we don't do that. Like, we don't have time to sit here and help you fill out all your forms. Go figure it out. Right. And what we do is we ask the people the questions. Hey, tell me this, tell me that. And we actually create all the forms for you. And then you review them and sign them based on the information you gave us over the phone.
Yeah. And it was, and there's a follow-up to that too. Once you fill it out, then you have to follow up and approve or certify, I think is what you guys call it.
Yes, good point. So the e-forms, when the e-forms came out, the ATF, our business model is a little different. We're not meeting face-to-face.
Yeah.
And so when you, basically when you certify with the ATF, you create an account so they know it's you. So that's kind of like your signature, and they give you a PIN and a username. And to submit the paperwork digitally to the ATF, we need that, but you can't give it to us. So what we do is they're not required to, but we take you through all the forms that you filled out and you signed and make sure we're all on the same page of what you filled out. We just have you verify it visually, and then you enter in your username and PIN, and you hit submit, and it's sort of a screen share. You can do it from your phone. Yeah. I had a guy call, goes, I was out hunting, and it took like 5 seconds. He's like, I hate paperwork. You guys made it easy. It's great.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. It's one of the best things I've done. And to your point, I don't even have one yet. and I'm on 3.
Oh wow! Yeah.
I
Okay.
have,
Cool.
I have 3 in
Yeah.
I have 3 in the process, and I haven't even owned one yet mostly because I bought the first 2 last year. I wanted the one that goes on every gun.
Yeah, totally.
And then I wanted one for rimfire.
Yep.
For my kids.
Oh, yeah.
For shooting squirrels and Eurasian doves and all the stuff
Yeah.
that we kill at our house.
Totally.
And then went on that hunt with Glenn Eberly from Eberly Stock and saw what it does and how awesome it is for hunting. I was like, I gotta get one that is for my backcountry, that's a lot lighter, a lot smaller. It doesn't add those are almost less than 6 inches long. They're not going to add 30 inches to your barrel that won't fit in a rifle scabbard.
Exactly.
So I have 3 coming, and I haven't even seen one yet, which is awesome. It's awesome. It's very addicting. And everybody when I did that last year at Safari Club, everybody I talked to said you won't end up with one. I'm like, what? They go, you'll end up with 4 or 5 is how that works.
Oh, yeah, totally. People just love them. Yeah, no, I was the same way. Like, I got to the point where I want to buy some for my other guns in case my 2 brothers come hunt with me. I don't want them to ruin my hunt.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Let's talk about that. I know there's some regulations and some laws that you have to be aware of for owning them and what you can and can't do with them. So what are some of those?
So you're probably thinking about the trust.
Yes.
So a lot of people say to me, should I buy it with a trust or should I not? So in August of 2016, Obama made some changes to the trust. It's somewhat irrelevant, but at that time, I think the government thought no one would ever use a trust again. So the benefit of using a trust is we transfer the silencer from us, the dealer, to a trust, and Silencer Central gives you a free trust. The trust owns it, and then anyone you put on the trust can use it when you're not there. So typically we would run it through with just your name on there, and then once it's approved, anyone you add is just sort of a stroke of the pen. As long as they can legally own a firearm and they're 18 or older, they can be on the trust.
Oh, wow.
So think of the trust solving 2 problems. One, it creates joint ownership. So your wife could go hunt if you're not there. Kids could go hunt as long as they're 18 or older. But also it allows someone to give it to someone you pass away. So typically the trust is set up where it says it could be given to any lawful heir per state law. So what would happen is like your spouse would say, okay, I want to give it to the oldest son because he'll use it. And then basically it becomes his. He's in charge of the trust.
So is it the thing that I haven't figured out? So I can put my whole family on there.
Yep.
I can even put my employees in my trust.
Yeah.
What happens if I add a suppressor to that trust? Do we have to all go back through the same paperwork again?
Good question. So typically what we do is we give you a new trust every time you get a new silencer, so you don't have to worry with that. I mean, there's a process where you could take everyone off and then go through it, but then no one can possess it while you're waiting. So it just becomes a hassle. It is significantly easier to do it with just your name because for some reason my in-laws have decided they want like 10 people on there, and it just, for everyone to have to submit fingerprints, photos, and 10 signatures, it never happens. You can't get 10 people to agree on anything.
Yeah.
So typically we say, hey, we give you a trust free. Let's just do one for each one. You can even call it the same name. The differentiator would be the date it was, inception, the date it started. We keep them digitally in our cloud server, so if you ever need it, we can always send it back to you. And then when you add people on there, then they can all use those that are already approved.
So then I have to add, every time I get a new suppressor, I have to add the people I want on that suppressor.
And it just takes a stroke of a pen. We just need like their full name and the date the trust was created, which we have on file.
You don't need fingerprints?
No.
Okay.
There's no background check. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The ATF, I kind of quizzed them on that. They're like, it's kind of out of our hands once it's approved. They don't really have standing at that point. So there's no, they don't do background checks at that point. Yeah, no, totally.
That's very nice. As long as they're lawful.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, as long as
and you wouldn't know that unless somebody got checked down the road.
No, that's the hard part. Yeah. So, some people like my father-in-law used to say, hey, I don't want to do a gun transfer unless you have a concealed carry. So at least then, say if you have a concealed carry.
He's carrying.
Yeah. Then you've had the same background check you would have gotten to buy a suppressor, so we'll feel comfortable putting you on the trust.
So what's in the future, Silencer Central? Where are you guys headed?
Gosh, I feel like there's so many people that don't know the benefits of suppressors. I mean, that's why I like working events, just to convince people that, hey, it's going to work. And I can feel it catching on because when I first started doing this, the whole conversation was they're legal.
Yeah.
And they're fun, and you'll like it.
Yeah.
And then once they get one, they did. So it's just continuing to sort of remind people, tell people. I think the volume only continues to increase. I mean, there's no negatives. Anyone who shoots a firearm doesn't like the recoil, they don't like the sound. If you can mitigate those 2 things,
it becomes a lot more fun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what are the top 3 questions you've answered this weekend at the Hunt Expo?
Top 3 questions. The question.
I should say the top 3 things that you make a point that they know.
Most people don't realize it reduces recoil.
Yeah.
Most people think, oh, it just works on sound. So then when they hear recoil, they're like, okay, kids, wife, like there's more benefits. They like that. The other big thing is people don't realize multi-caliber. So a guy will look at his safe and see 30 guns and say, I don't want to get the silencers. I'll have to buy 30 of them.
Right.
And when you sit there in front of a guy and say, tell me what you have, and they list this long list, and you say, this one you're holding will work on all those. And they look at you like, what? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, really? And I'm like, see how light that is? It's not going to have that much weight. They're like, oh, I get it. I'm interested.
So do you have to? So they have to go get them threaded.
Yep.
Barrels threaded.
Most of them come with brakes these days, but we thread barrels too. So, always tell people, hey, if you're comfortable with who does it locally, that's fine. But we also can mail you an empty gun case, put your rifle in there, take your scope off. We pay the postage back to us, FedEx ground. We thread it, takes a week, and then we just ship it right back to you.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
That's really
totally.
good to know.
Yeah, no, totally. It's funny. We redesigned our building. We did like a remodel, and the guy who was the contractor, I had all these architects and contractors wanting to give bids to rebuild our building.
Mm-hmm.
And my contractor who had bought suppressors from me, he said, Brandon, I didn't know you threaded barrels, so I think we need to have this big open glass window, has your huge,
Barrel threading.
CNC machine. It's super nice.
Yeah.
It's like a super high-end computer that threads them, so everyone that walks in sees it. It's a conversation piece. I was like, dude, you're hired. I don't even care if you're more expensive. I was like, that's a great idea. That's totally what we need.
Yeah, you're thinking the same way I am.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
because you're right. I'm looking at my gun safe and I'm thinking, well, that 300, that's 10 years old. It doesn't have threads, so I just won't put it on that, or I send it to you and have you do it.
Totally. We've been doing it a long time, and we got to figure it out. I got a gunsmith takes them apart. I got a machinist that turns the barrels, put them back together, ship them right back to you. So it's no. So if
just a second, and it doesn't matter. Because once you put a suppressor on it, you have to re-zero it anyway.
Totally, exactly.
The pressure changes where your zero is.
Yeah, typically you'll see it'll shoot a little bit lower the suppressor because you're not going to get as much jump on it. And then once you once you sight it back in, it's going to be zeroed. So the other thing the reason why we got into barrel threading is because anytime you talk to a customer, you can tell, I don't know if my local gunsmith can do that, or I'm not sure if I trust him. So it's like, all right, let's fill that gap.
Or do I even have one?
Totally. So the other thing that's a big gap here that you were asking about questions people ask, like, so I always make this joke, and it's funny to me, but probably not to most people, but if you buy a Yeti cooler for like $500 and you bring that home after being at a sporting event, your wife's going to give you a hard time. Now, if you buy a suppressor and you spend, $700-800 and you don't bring anything home, your wife's going to be even more mad. So
I got a catalog, honey.
Yeah, totally. So what we do is we say, hey, we're going to let you pay while you wait. So a guy will come up to the booth. He's like, my wife will kill me. And I'm like, well, what if you put $150 down? I'm not going to charge you any interest. I'm going to let you pay while you wait. And as long as you pay it off when it's approved, I'll ship it to your front door. They're like, I'm in. So that really helps sales at shows because guys just, I just honest with them. I'm like, I created this because I had a guy that worked for me. He'd come from the pawn shop business. And he's like, Brandon, 80% of our population of the pawn shop came and paid their bill. Your customers are like,
they're gonna.
Yeah, they're going to, it's going to have 100%.
Yeah.
Because if they pay and you say, hey, you quit paying, you don't get it, they're going to figure out a way to get the money to pay it off.
And it won't be the whole amount. It'll be a sizable bite.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no. So, and basically what we say is, hey, if you don't want to finish paying, we'll resell it to someone else, whatever you want to do. And most people are like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll pay for it. But that really helped. And I think people appreciate that. Like, I'm in the boat with you. I don't want you to have to pay for the whole thing up front. But if you want to just pay while you're waiting. I don't want to hold
your money for
100%.
That many
But
months.
what's unique is our business model allows for that because I'm the manufacturer, I'm the wholesaler, I'm the dealer. I'm your single point of contact for everything. So that gives us an advantage.
Right.
So that's a big question we get of, well, how do I pay for it? What's this I hear about you guys will do like a layaway where there's no interest? So that's a big question. Sometimes people ask about traveling across state lines. There's not any paperwork for silencers, which when I first bought one, they told me there was. It's more for it's specifically for short barrel rifles, machine guns, destructive devices, any other weapons, but silencers aren't on the list. So if you're crossing state lines.
Oh, that's a great question. I never thought of that. If I go to Colorado and hunt a deer, can I do that?
You're fine. Yeah, no, totally. As long as you're not going into like Illinois or states where they're illegal. There's some ways around it, because of interstate laws and things like that. But
how many states are they illegal in?
8. So it's California, Illinois, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Rhode Island.
Really?
Yeah, everywhere else it's fine. You can hunt in 41 of the 42 states where they're legal. The only state you can't hunt in with a suppressor where they're legal is Connecticut.
Huh. I didn't know. That's all great. That's all great knowledge.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And so another thing I like to tell people about the whole firearms thing. So most people that are Second Amendment people, gun people, they feel like that everyone's taking away their rights, and I don't disagree with that. But I'll tell you what's interesting is with suppressors, when I first started doing this, there was more states where they were illegal than there is today.
Yeah.
And in most states, you couldn't hunt with them, whereas today you can. So sometimes laws do change in a positive, because people will say, hey, I'm afraid they're going to take it away, or I don't want to get it because this is going to happen. I'm like, dude, if I've seen anything, I've seen a flip where people see these aren't used, and it's not a public safety issue. That's the ATF's hot button. Is it a public safety issue? And if you read ever about a silencer in any kind of shooting, almost 100% of the time, they made it themselves. It wasn't acquired through the process.
So, yeah, that's true, because 3 years ago, when I first learned about them, I got asked by somebody that was going to come to Wyoming hunt, can I use them? And I said, no, those are illegal in Wyoming. And he goes, no, I think they're legal. And they were. They had just changed it.
Yeah.
But it's a game changer, an absolute game changer in the field.
Totally.
100%.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to ask you a couple personal questions. If that's cool.
Yeah.
You good with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll figure out an answer.
Yeah. So, wife and kids?
Yeah.
Adult kids?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. So, my wife's originally from South Dakota. Both her parents pharmacists. She's a pharmacist. And she's a manager of the hospital pharmacy in town.
Okay.
And we have two daughters. So we have a 17-year-old, that's the oldest, and then we have one that's 15.
Oh, nice.
And you're in Wyoming, so you may have this too, but it's difficult for me because I grew up in North Carolina where you got to be 16 to drive by yourself.
Yeah.
My daughter was 14, which
Oh, yeah.
just doesn't seem like, I get it, agricultural, but of course I don't live in an agricultural town being city of Sioux Falls, but yeah, my kid at 14, I had to buy her a car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's completely different.
I'm facing that too. My oldest is going to be 13 next month, and I told my wife the other night, I said, you realize in a year she could be driving.
I know, it just seems
Scary.
odd. And my girls, I always say, are significantly more mature than I am, so I don't
Yes.
anticipate any issues,
Yes.
but still, you just worry about
Other people.
Yeah, totally,
ability to
absolutely.
react.
Yeah.
So, what is one thing that you're going to be thinking about when this is all over, and God willing, you have the ability to sit back and go, okay, I know when my timestamp is. It's in the next X amount of days, or months, or years.
Yeah.
What is one of the things that you're going to be thinking about?
Yeah, so, one thing that's probably really important in our family is education. My dad was in academia my whole career. My grandfather just couldn't go to high school or middle school working on the farm, so he actually paid for my siblings to go to college. He basically gave my dad his inheritance, 20 years early, because we had 4 kids. So we all went to either law or medical or pharmacy professional degrees. So my dad paid for all of it because my granddad had.
Wow.
And then my granddad being in academia. So definitely education related, but probably what I've seen like in the last, probably 10 years is my daughters are in a public Christian school. And I feel like that has continue to like strengthen the faith in the entire family.
Yeah.
So to have the kids sort of growing up in that environment, I think continues to challenge the parents. So you're continuing to think about your faith and strengthening your faith. So I'm totally 100% working with the local school there on how can I help them create an endowment, because their struggle is we're competing with public schools on salaries, and we're having trouble recruiting the right people. And also we need an endowment to keep the tuition down, because there's some kids that just can't afford it. And the way they explain it to me is, there's a third of kids that their parents just write a check. They don't even think about it. There's a third of the kids that it's tough and they're having to work to get that tuition. And then there's a third that just can't afford it.
That aren't going to be there.
And I think it's been so important for our family just to see our faith grow as the 4 of us, that it's like, gosh, how can I give more to them for their endowment so that they can make a difference and help other people in the community? So I think, I'd say that's where.
So Brandon, my Brandon. Mason, he started a Christian school where we live.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he started a little tiny Christian school. Still sits on the board, even though his kids have passed what the capability of that school was to do. That's really fun. It was fun to watch when he moved there. They got passionate about it, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. He says this all the time. The kids that can't afford it, or the kids that are struggling, they're the ones that really need it.
Oh, totally.
I mean, not that money matters, but
yeah,
they're the ones that when you give that positive influence to them, they see the blessings, and then they see, I'm being taken care of what I'm given, and I get more.
No, totally.
And it's a game changer.
Yeah, and so like I would say I've spent most of my adult life studying people who've been successful, because my theory is if you want to be successful, you got to study people that have been and follow what they do. And almost everyone who's been highly successful, they'll tell you they enjoy giving back more than they do getting. And also the more they give, the more they get.
Yes.
So I totally...
It's definitely a snowball effect.
I totally bought into that. I mean, it's...
you probably are a Dave Ramsey fan.
Oh, yeah, I love Dave Ramsey.
Oh, yeah.
So I was on a show once.
Were you? So was I.
Really. So I called and told him, hey, I'm at a crossroad here. I was like, my parents, I spent 8 years in college with pharmacy school, MBA from Duke, and they think I should be like corporate and keep moving up the ladder. But I'm like, man, I really enjoy the silencers. And I was like, it's painful, I think, for my family to think I would walk away from that education. And I'm like, what do you think I should do? And I could tell he owns suppressors because he instantly
He's
knew.
a big gun guy.
Oh, yeah, totally. And he's like, dude, I think you should go for it. Like, I called, and when I called, you had to leave a message, and they called me back instantly. And they're like, dude, you're the first one in the morning. Yeah. So I was on. I loved it. And for years, I'd have people come up and go, gosh, you got to be the guy who was on Dave Ramsey. It's so weird that you're like a pharmacist and you started this business. And I go, yeah. It's funny. I got to be friends with Willie, with the guys with the Duck Commander, Buck Commander.
Yeah.
And they were coming out to Sioux Falls to Pheasant Hunt this year, and they were going to come by my office because we're right by the airport.
Yep.
But then they were flying directly to Pier, and I missed them. But I was so excited Dave Ramsey was going to come to our office. I was going to give him a tour and show him around. Because honestly, I think he gave me the confidence. Because everyone else in my family, like we were always taught, go to school, get an education, get a graduate degree, work in that field, move your way up. So to sort of like walk away from that and do just silencers, he was kind of the first person that goes, I think you can do it. You got the passion, you got the energy. It's something new. It can grow. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So my family's been involved in the Dave Ramsey plan since 2005.
Oh, sure.
Personally, and then we went into the business side of it in 2008, and I've run my business that way forever. I've been to two summits. I went to one of the first master classes they ever had.
Oh,
it was
cool.
in Mexico, which was was a weird event.
Yeah.
Weird venue, but it was so much fun, and it's fun to meet other people. And I've actually met a lot of business owners that live that way. Because he's killing it.
Yeah.
So,
totally. Yeah. No,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, better than I deserve, right? Yep.
Absolutely.
So my favorite billboard in Atlanta, when I would fly through there and I would see it, it says, act your wage.
Yep.
Dave Ramsey.
Yep, that's right. Act your wage. So cool.
I love it.
Well, Brandon, I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And chatting with us. And, I hope we shared with our audience why suppressors are important in the field, and that it is not a daunting task to get them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, it's very easy.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, hopefully we can work together a little bit more and get the ball rolling.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Hey folks, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You got to hang out with some of the people that I think are the most interesting I've ever met. And remember, fair chase is the only way to hunt and take trophy big game. See you next time right here on Eastman's Podcast Edition.